Hello, welcome back to another episode of Focus on Outcomes. Patrick, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Jeff. How are you?
Great. We're excited to have a good guest today.
We are. Today we have the pleasure of hosting Matt Thomson, Director of Cyber Liability at M3 Insurance. We first met Matt last year. He was a keynote speaker for us and a panelist on some cyber security breakfast that we hosted. You have a very impressive background. We're happy to have you. So Matt, welcome to Focus on Outcomes.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right. So to get us started a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do at M3.
Yeah, so at M3, I'm our Director of Cyber Liability. And what that really entails is I get to help our clients with their cyber risk management as a whole. Primary focus is on cyber risk transfer for a cybersecurity policy. But we work with all of our clients and some of their IT partners and all of that to determine or help them come to determine what they may need to focus on implementing cybersecurity-wise going forward to give them the best chance at continuing to maintain not only the cybersecurity policy, but hopefully they never have to use it if they're continuing that. And then finally, the other piece is that what ifs or worst case scenario of they have a cyber incident, and then we come in to help them with getting them aligned with all the resources that their cyber policy brings to the table and really help them in that worst day to make sure that not only are they financially compensated for it, but also walking them through, because most of them have never experienced or haven't experienced one recently. So there's a lot of unknowns that they face.
Sure. So you have a pretty interesting story and background. How did you get involved in cyber liability, I guess?
Yeah, so I'm kind of a bit of a unicorn in the cyber insurance world. I won't say that I'm the only one, but I come from operational cyber background. So I spent over 15 years as a cyber professional before jumping into cyber insurance over the last just over 2 years. So I've been in the shoes of many of the IT managers or information security officers or directors of IT security, whoever we may be talking to at the clients. So I think I bring a kind of interesting perspective, and I can kind of help them understand where the rubber meets the road of their cyber policy.
Yeah. So obviously not naming names, but follow up to that. What's kind of maybe a craziest kind of breach story that you've encountered either on your operation side or on the insurance side?
Yeah, there's so many to count, unfortunately. But the first one that comes to mind is proof that it always happens in the least convenient time. This last year over Christmas, we had a client who had a ransomware, and I'm driving my sister's house to spend Christmas with my family. After doing opening gifts with my kids and my wife in the morning, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I get a call. Hey, our client has a ransomware. So I get to my sister's house, do the, hey, everybody, nice to see you. Hey, sister, can I grab your office? Because I got to do some work, and spent, an hour and a half getting our clients aligned with the legal and forensics that they needed for that. So, cyber criminals don't take a day off usually. The other one that is kind of a funny in retrospect story was a client of ours whose municipality was building a new building, and they got socially engineered into paying a criminal instead of the subcontractor. It was $2.6 million. That's not the funny part. But they were really bad cyber criminals. And about 14 to 17 days later, when they figured out what happened and notified us, the FBI was actually able to recover a little over $2 million of that back, because the cyber criminals were just apparently lazy or didn't know what they were doing, and hadn't offshored that money yet.
Okay. So yeah, what's the difference between a good cyber criminal and a bad one, I guess, in this context?
Yeah, in this context, the good cyber criminals, usually that money's gone after 48 hours. And if you don't identify it within those first day or two, you're looking pretty much only to your cyber policy or maybe the bank to recover some of those funds. But yeah, the cyber criminal 2 weeks later still left that money in a U.S. bank.
Yeah, I think it's an important point for people who are listening to pay attention to, because we actually had a customer have something similar happen just last week, and it wasn't 2.6 million, but it's still 400,000. But because the incident was identified quickly and we were all able to act quickly, they were able to stop the transfer before it went into the other bank account. I think that's especially, as we've been doing some cyber awareness, there was recently a whole month dedicated to that, that time matters. And when you think you've done something that maybe you shouldn't have, you have to raise your hand. There's no pride here in maybe hoping something doesn't happen. You clicked on a link, you entered in credentials. The thing you thought would happen didn't happen. You have to tell someone, because time is super critical in these situations to save a couple $1 million or a couple 100,000 or even thousands. I mean, time matters, and it's critical that people pay attention to that and kind of set their pride aside.
Yeah, exactly. And I think organizations, to your point with the security awareness training, it's not always just about the identifying when something happens, but what should I do when I realize something went wrong? And then also organizationally being okay with not chastising that person because they made a mistake.
Sounds like you listened to a recent episode of ours.
I think I did driving recently. Yeah.
We talked about that.
Yeah.
So good segue into incident response. So talk a little bit about the importance of having an IR program, and what is it? Why is it important? And what role does M3 or other insurance providers play in that incident response?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's really interesting too, dependent upon the size of the business. The incident response plan that you have at a Fortune 100, Fortune 250 level company that has their own internal team is going to look pretty different from, a smaller size business in that SME space that, either fully outsources their IT or co-manages their IT or anything like that, that probably doesn't have an incident response team on staff or a cybersecurity team on staff. So one of the biggest things that we talk about with that is, one, understanding what's covered by your policy. I liken it to, on a physical side, if you have a fire in your house, you dial 911, get the fire department out there, and they come put out your fire. In the cyber world, your cyber insurance policy kind of plays that role. Sure. So you call your insurance broker or insurance carrier, and they're going to bring to table the what they call a breach coach, which is a legal expert, a lawyer who specializes in data privacy and breach notification and all of that piece to prevent you from potential future litigation and everything. And then they also bring in incident response team, digital forensics, like an Arctic Wolf or a Mandiant of the world, to come in and determine, how did the criminals get in? What data did they potentially steal? What systems did they access? All of that kind of stuff. And when it comes to the incident response plan for these types of organizations, a lot of the questions that get asked when the legal and forensics teams come in is, hey, we need to understand your environment. Who are your what are your key systems? Who are your key vendors? What contacts do you have for them as we need to get logs and data and or rebuild those systems? And so that's what you find really organizations of that size need in their incident response plan, is who internally can make decisions and who externally may I potentially need to reach out to for help as I'm rebuilding.
So a little bit about cyber insurance for people who aren't super familiar with it. We talk a lot with our clients, and adding certain layers of security, making certain investments might either lower or keep your premiums the same, because we're seeing those go up. How are cyber insurance rates, I guess, determined, and what happens to the organization when they have a breach, when they go back to either renew or find a new policy?
So that's a common question that's asked. To some extent, it's a little bit of a black box. From each insurance carrier has their own way of doing it. But in general, there are a few pieces that an organization can control and some that they frankly can't. So one that they can't is what the cyber criminals are doing and which industries they may be targeting. So let's say that you're in healthcare space and we know that cyber criminals consistently target healthcare organizations. you're probably going to have higher premium than, say, a manufacturer, because you're just
Bigger
frankly
target. Yep.
a bigger target
Yep.
broadly across your industry. The pieces that you can control, however, are, what kind of security controls do you have in place? Both technical controls and administrative or operational controls. So are you using multi-factor authentication? Do you have security awareness training for your employees? Do you have good backups? Do you test those backups? And then another one that we're really seeing, I won't say a requirement, but when we talk to the underwriters and the insurance carriers, that gives you the best rate right now, is having endpoint detection response, or preferably managed detection response capabilities. So having an organization or somebody who's monitoring your systems 24/7. Because to your point earlier, you have to act fast, and cyber criminals are going to work at 3 a.m. when the rest of your team is asleep. So who's there to catch them at that time?
Do you see that becoming like the SIMSOC managed detection response? Do you see that being a requirement for SMBs in the future?
I don't know that it'll necessarily be a requirement, but it's very apparent that that's how you unlock your best rates.
Sure. Okay. So last question I have. So you're fairly active on LinkedIn. I've seen a couple spirited debates that you've had with other insurance leaders about whether or not traditional brokers should be in the cyber insurance game or not. What's kind of fueling that debate? Is that actually something that we are debating?
Yeah, to some extent. So, and really, it's more, does your broker advise you appropriately? And no offense to those who are jacks of all trades, but the cyber realm, it's evolving a lot faster because, frankly, fire is a fire is a fire, an earthquake is an earthquake is an earthquake.
And we can understand the damage,
Yes,
right?
Exactly. It hasn't changed as much. We still don't, we've got some data about what is the short and long-term impact of a cyber incident. And so being able to talk about that, keep up with what the cyber criminals are doing, keep up with new trends in cyber protection, cyber defense, and even just frankly down to some of the nuanced terminology that you find within cyber as a whole, and then cyber insurance. So, I think finding a good broker who has somebody, whether they have taken time to really dive deeper into the cyber insurance, or the cyber realm, or a broker who's got somebody or a team who specializes in that, just because it's a little bit different. And going back to what I said earlier, not that I want to claim to be a unicorn, but somebody who can speak on your behalf with the underwriters and talk not only to your traditional insurance buyer, like a CFO, a risk manager, somebody of that sort, but also talk to the IT team or the managed IT provider as they're filling out those, 10, 12 page applications that have a lot of nuances to the questions, and you're trying to, distill it down to a yes or a no.
Are there certifications for brokers in the insurance space for cyber, as there is for property and casualty and life and all the other things?
There are a few. They're not necessarily widely out there. One is through an insurance carrier called Chubb. They've got their cyber certification. And then there is another under I think it's from Professional Liability Underwriters. They've got a cyber certification, but it's not as widely out there as some of the other.
So not necessarily something that a business owner should be asking their broker, do you have this? But do you have access to resources that have expertise that can help walk us through this versus just can I get a good rate?
Correct.
Because a good rate at a time of loss doesn't necessarily equal the kind of return and coverage that you're expecting.
Exactly. And, it's where the rubber meets the road. And and not every cyber insurance policy is created equal. Some cover more than others. And having somebody who understands the nuances and can talk to you as a business owner to say, for instance, one that we see out there is some insurance carriers cover what they call unauthorized collection. And so that's basically, does GDPR or CCPA or some of those state laws, or particularly closer to us here in Wisconsin, down in Illinois, the biometric privacy down in Illinois, so there might be a exclusion on many policies that won't cover any defenses for that versus another policy might cover that. So if your business has people using, biometrics for clocking in and out of their time, maybe that's something that you want to make sure is covered under your policy versus, another coverage item that may or may not apply to you is contingent business interruption or system failure, which is like, do you rely heavily on an external third party to help you continue your business, whether that's an IT third party or, a supplier of parts if you're a manufacturer. So talking through some of those nuances of different policies. So you may spend a little bit more, but you get broader or more coverage in one versus the other.
Great. Well, we really appreciate you sharing some of that knowledge and some of your expertise. Obviously, it's rooted in a lot of time spent, and it's really valuable for not only us, but for our listeners. So let's transition to our unfocused outcomes section. We still don't have a sponsor for this, but we'll get there at some point. So we'll ask some rapid fire questions, kind of share the first thing that comes to your mind, and we'll have a little fun with this.
Okay.
All right. What are your standard pizza toppings?
I am a meat lovers with pineapple. Pineapple kind of works with the saltiness of the pepperoni and sausage.
All right. Take your word for it. If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what job would you be working?
I'd say, as much as I don't get to golf right now with 5 kids, working at a golf course as pro, or grounds crew, something I've done in my past, or being more corporate, I'd say something in finance or business.
What is your airplane seat preference? Are you an aisle guy, a window guy?
I'm a first class guy.
There you go. There you go.
But when that's not feasible, I'm an aisle seat over the wing specifically.
Aisle over the wing. All right. What's the last book you've read?
So my nerdy last book that I just completed was called Quantum Radio by A.G. Riddle.
Oh, yeah.
We were just talking about that earlier this morning.
Really?
Yeah. What was your favorite part?
I think my favorite part of that was just kind of like how baffling it was, like thinking about all the different possibilities of the universe, like that people could be living in.
It makes me really uncomfortable.
Very similar to a conversation you and I have never had.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So besides this, what is your favorite podcast to listen to?
I would say I like a lot of like business leadership ones, like At the Table with Patrick Lencioni or the Jocko Willink podcast. But then my other nerdy cyber ones are Darknet Diaries or CISO Series.
All right. Very good. Lencioni's on a break this fall. I'm a little disappointed. They'll come back. What is your favorite holiday?
I think just phase of life that I'm in, Christmas, 5 kids, seeing the joy on their face, getting up, seeing
still magical.
Presents. Yep. Still very magical for them.
Very cool.
Well, before we wrap up today, Matt, I'm hoping you can share with people where they can find you and find M3 and learn a little bit more about your organization.
Yeah. If you go to m3ins.com, we've got all of our cyber capabilities out there. There's a link to contact me there. Or, as you said before, active on LinkedIn. So Matthew Thomson, that's Thomson without a P. So Thomson. Connect with me out there on LinkedIn, and happy to make those connections and start any conversations.
Great. Matt, thanks for being on the podcast. Really great to see you. I always learn a few things whenever we chat. So really a pleasure having you.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Thanks.